Assalamu alaikum. Today I will discuss about an interesting matters that the distended bladder will increase our blood pressure. Okay, so I will try to explain the underlying pathophysiology. Okay, so all of us know that the urinary bladder is supplied by T11 to L2 sympathetic nervous system. Okay, that means T11 to L2 spinal segment supplies our urinary bladder. Okay, so for example, here I have taken just one spinal segment for better understanding. Suppose this is the spinal segment. Now you can think that the spinal segment represents the T11 to L2. Okay, so we know that the sympathetic preganglionic neuron, remember, sympathetic preganglionic neuron lies in the lateral horn cells. Okay, that means the lateral horn cell acts as preganglionic sympathetic neuron. Okay, so here the red marked neuron is preganglionic sympathetic neuron. So this nerve come here and supplies the postganglionic neuron. So this is the ganglia, sympathetic ganglia. This is also called the collateral ganglia. We know that there are some types of sympathetic ganglia. Some are the paravertebral, which are known as sympathetic chain, and some are the prevertebral, that means just in front of the vertebra or above the aorta. These are known as collateral ganglia. So the urinary bladder is supplied from the collateral ganglia, okay, which is also known as the hypogastric ganglia. So this red neuron is the preganglionic neuron, and it supplies the blue colored postganglionic neuron. Okay. Now we know that there are also some sensory neurons of sympathetic nervous system. So the green color one is sensory fiber. So the sensation will be carried through this sensory fiber. You can see here this sensory fiber comes, and here it will sends the signal into this dorsal root ganglia. Okay, so that means this green color neuron is the sensory neuron of sympathetic nervous system. So then this signal will carried into here. Okay, remember, this signal directly carried into the spinal cord. Okay, and it will supplies the interneuron. Then this interneuron will stimulate the lateral horn cell, that means sympathetic preganglionic neuron. That means here we can see that this is actually a reflex arc. That means the sensation is carried through this green sensory neuron, then this sensation will transmit into the interneuron, then this interneuron will again activate or stimulate this red colored lateral horn cell, that means sympathetic preganglionic neuron. Okay, so whenever the urinary bladder will be distended or the urinary bladder is full, then here will be a strong stimulus, a strong sensation, a strong pressure sensation or distension sensation, stretch sensation, which will be carried through this sensory sympathetic fiber, and this will ultimately activate the lateral horn cell. So as the sensation is carried towards the T11 to L2 spinal segment, as I have told you that the T11 to L2 segment supplies the urinary bladder. That means the sensory fiber will enters into the T11 to L2 spinal segment. So the lateral horn cells of T11 to L2 segments will be activated here. Okay. So this is the important things. So when the interneuron will activate the lateral horn cell, so it will then start to release the acetylcholine towards or on postganglionic neuron. Okay, So this postganglionic neuron, then will be activated and it will start to release norepinephrine on the urinary bladder, and this norepinephrine will act on beta 2 receptors of this urinary bladder and will facilitate the distension of the urinary bladder. That means the sympathetic activity facilitate to store the urine within the bladder. Okay, but one interesting things that will happen there, that means the spinal segments, we know that the T10, T11, T12 and L1 and L2, these spinal segments supplies the major portion of our splanchnic circulations. That means the blood vessels which supplies our gastrointestinal tract. So here you can see these are the splanchnic circulations. So I have just mentioned you that T11, T10 to L2, this spinal segment supplies the major portion of this splanchnic circulation. Okay, so whenever the lateral horn cell will be stimulated due to the distended bladder, so the lateral horn cell also release excitatory neurotransmitter on these blood vessels. Okay, on these blood vessels. So we know that sympathetic neuron will act on the blood vessels through alpha 1 receptors. That's why whenever your urinary bladder will be distended, these blood vessels will undergo vasoconstriction, so the overall resistance will be increased. Now you may ask a question that why the vasoconstriction of splanchnic circulation will increase the total peripheral resistance, because this is a small portion of your circulatory system. No, if I can show you the diagram from Guidance and Hall, you can see here that splanchnic circulation consists of 27% of your cardiac output. So the vasoconstriction of splanchnic circulation means that it has an important role on your total peripheral resistance, because it only consists of 27% of your total circulation. Okay, that's why ultimately due to this splanchnic vasoconstriction your total peripheral resistance will rise, and that's why the blood pressure will rise due to distension of this urinary bladder. Moreover, one interesting thing, you can know that the spinal segment T8, that means T8 to L1, these spinal segments supplies to the suprarenal gland. So due to the distension of urinary bladder, T11 to L2 spinal segments also start to release the excitatory signals to your suprarenal glands. So suprarenal glands then start to release epinephrine in your circulation, which is also a vasoconstrictor substance. That's why it also do vasoconstriction of your overall whole circulation. That was your overall blood pressure will tends to rise. Okay, moreover, we know that T10 to L1, these spinal segments forms the aortic renal ganglions. That's why whenever your urinary bladder will be distended, then T11 to L2 segments also stimulate the aorticorenal sympathetic ganglion. Then the aorticorenal sympathetic ganglion will send excitatory signals to your renal circulation. That means your afferent arteriole will be vasoconstricted. That's why ultimately your renal circulation undergo vasoconstriction. And we know that the kidney, your both kidney consist of 22% of your cardiac output. That means this renal circulation will also undergo vasoconstriction. That means you have understood that splanchnic circulation, which comprises of 27% of total cardiac output, and kidneys, that means renal circulation, which comprise of 22% of your total circulation. That means a major portion of circulation will undergo vasoconstriction whenever your bladder is distended. That's why moreover your suprarrenal gland also will be stimulated, and it will start to release epinephrine in your circulation. That's why blood pressure tends to rise during distended urinary bladder. So this is the underlying mechanism. That's why our blood pressure slightly raise. So you may ask a question that, as I explained that the multiple mechanism is happening there, so why not the blood pressure is increasing so much? Yes, because Almighty Subhanahu wa Taala, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala has given the vasomotor center in our medulla, and the medulla, it detects that our blood pressure is getting high up, and that's why it suppresses the lateral horn cell of spinal cord through the rostral ventrolateral medulla. Okay, that means whenever our blood pressure increase due to this distended bladder, the peripheral baroreceptor detect this sense, and it will call the brain to take appropriate steps to control the increased pressure. That's why our vasomotor central will start to release the inhibitory neurotransmitter over the lateral horn cell. That's why our upper center, that means medulla, will try to close the reflex arc. That's why blood pressure increase, but not so much. But if there is any lesion, spinal cord lesion, especially T6 or above the T6 level, then this inhibitory signals cannot descend through your spinal cord. That's why in that cases, due to distended bladder, blood pressure will increase so much if there is any spinal cord lesion. But in case of a normal person, as we are, our blood pressure increases but not so much due to the interference of our higher center, that means medulla, or more specifically the vasomotor center. Thank you everyone. If you like my lectures, then please like, share and subscribe my channel, and keep me in your prayer. Allah Hafiz. Assalamu alaikum.